So, hello, everybody. Today, I'd like to share with you the latest episode of Clinton County's Mental Health Virtual Speaker Series. The series is made possible through a health initiative for rural Pennsylvania grant from the Pennsylvania Office of Rural Health, brought to you by our advisory group, which consists of Clinton County Commissioners, Commonwealth University Lock Haven, Clinton County Emergency Services, Clinton County Housing Coalition, Keystone Central School District, UPMC, Bucktail Medical Center, Keystone Counseling, and Clinton County United Way. Our speaker today is Donovan Hall. Donovan is a youth advocate and educator that teaches kids how to build positive self-identity. He's been featured on the Today Show, Now This, Daily Mail TV, and several podcasts to discuss the importance of positive youth development. Donovan teaches his self-skills curriculum through coaching, speeches, and online content. He's currently created an educational entertainment show to help reach an even bigger audience of kids. You can also find him on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, all the places.
Okay, and YouTube. Before we begin, we'll share a short video that talks more about Active Minds, the nation's premier nonprofit organization supporting mental health awareness and education for young adults. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Donovan Hall, talking about self-care and recovery. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to share the video right now just to make sure that we get a chance to introduce you all to Active Minds. I'm super grateful to be here on their behalf, speaking to you today, to be a part of this program. I think this is a wonderful series. So I'm going to go ahead and share our video that tells you a little bit more about the work that Active Minds does. One thing I do want to mention is that this video primarily focuses on the work that we've done on college campuses, but recently Active Minds as a bureau has been branching out, working with high schools, middle schools, professional development. And I'm really glad to be a part of this because the work that I do, although it's geared towards kids, is very much human-centered work. In fact, a lot of the work that I teach comes from my own experience that I had as a young adult, getting help for my mental health. So even though this video talks about our experiences on college campuses, I just wanted to own that we are branching out and working with larger communities such as your own.
Getting on a college campus for the first time can be so overwhelming because you're kind of facing the world by yourself for the first time.
Growing up, I did have a lot of family members who suffered from mental health challenges. It wasn't something that was always talked about.
It's been very difficult to talk about what does it mean to be sad versus to be depressed? What does it mean to be stressed versus to be anxious?
After losing my friend, I needed something. I was struggling a lot myself.
I started Active Minds when I was a freshman in college after losing my brother, Brian, my only sibling, to suicide. Active Minds is a national nonprofit organization focused on changing the conversation about mental health. We're most well known for mobilizing young adults to get involved in and change culture around mental health.
We know that life is tough for young adults. And we also know that it's not just the students who have mental illness that have issues, it's all students. We have enough research to know that all students are dealing with things like depression and anxiety and the epidemic of loneliness.
Active Minds is serving as this institution on a campus that is getting students talking, having programming during Suicide Prevention Month, having stress relief activities during exams, screening movies, having panel discussions and keynote speakers, all with a mental health theme, so that it's not just that we're talking about mental health when there's a crisis, but we're talking about mental health every day.
One of the things I love about our partnership with Active Minds is that they are creative and engaging and relatable. It's just in this easy language, vernacular that you use on a normal. And I think that helps to decrease the stigma. It helps to start the conversation.
I love that Active Minds is able to make the topic of mental health very broad, so that way all people feel included in it.
We were thrilled to start working with the RAND Corporation to understand if Active Minds was really making a difference. It was a longitudinal study.
It has shown that the presence of an Active Minds chapter on a campus, just that alone makes people access counseling more, feel more comfortable.
Those students had lower stigma and improved attitudes around mental health simply because they felt like their campus cared. That's unparalleled in the mental health field.
It's amazing the progress that this movement is making. I feel that through your work and in the generations to come, you're at a tipping point.
We really see ourselves as the organization that is going to propel change in America around mental health.
They're the leading organization on college campuses. All of our players come from college campuses. So now when you come into the National Football League, guess what? We're going to continue the conversation. We're going to help you to continue the conversation. So no better way to do that than with our partnership with Active Minds.
When Color Street chose to partner with Active Minds, we knew that they had an amazing story to tell. Having a national reach through our network of independent sales associates and customers, Active Minds has given us the language we need to help them get the conversation going in the communities where they are.
I think what Active Minds has done has been an extraordinary contribution to not only college campuses, but as a model for what we can do in civil society to make sure that we look out for each other in the same way that we hope people will look out for ourselves.
The empathy, the knowledge I gained from Active Minds is something that I will carry with me long after graduating from college.
Active Minds has just changed my life. It's something that I'm not sure I would be here without. It was my savior, it was my passion, and it's something that I will never forget.
Active Minds is saving lives. Active Minds is a change maker. Help us as we continue to change the conversation about mental health.
All right. Thank you so much for watching that. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about one of my favorite subjects. And this presentation is titled BYOBF, which I'll tell you about a little bit later on. But first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Donovan Taylor Hall. I'm a youth advocate, an educator, speaker, content creator, and a video game streamer. I stream video games for kids while talking about mental health and other important subjects that they don't normally get to speak about. I really want to teach young people how to feel good about who they are, because how we feel about ourselves in so many ways determines how we show up in the world. Now, the reason that I'm here today is that I've had a dream for a really long time, and that dream is to be a truly public teacher. I think that in education, students are not often given an opportunity to choose who they learn from and to choose to listen to people that they want to learn from. And so over the past 10 years, I've been working on building this dream. And a few years ago, oddly enough, I made a TikTok account that my students told me to make, and I was showing the work online. And I got very lucky and very blessed. Hoda from the Today Show found out about it, and they did a story on my work. And so now I am very much living this dream. And the reason I bring that up is because I want to start by saying thank you. I recognize that you all are choosing to be here. Thank you for being a part of this space and this conversation, no matter where you're at with it. So if you're someone who has a lot of knowledge and experience with mental health, it's wonderful to have you here. And if you're someone that has never really talked about it or thought about it before, I'm also very grateful that you're here and want to offer you a perspective today. With that being said, we live in a time where it feels like everyone is somehow an expert in something. If you go online, if you look at social media, everyone is saying, this is the right way, this is the way you have to do it. And I'm a firm believer in choice. And so when I talk to you all today, I'm going to be offering you some practices, some concepts, and also just a new perspective on thinking about mental health. And it's just an offer. So I want you to be able to choose for yourself what sticks, what kind of connects with you, and then leave what doesn't. And I'm just grateful that you're here no matter what. So we hear mental health a lot, and I think it's important to start from a working definition. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And it also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to other people, and make healthy choices. So I like this perspective because oftentimes when we hear about mental health, it's just about depression and anxiety. And although those are a big part of what I'm going to talk to you about today, I think that there's a lot of practices and skills and tools to help us connect with mental health, no matter where we're at. So I work with middle schoolers. Middle schoolers get a lot of, they get a bad rep, is what I'll say, because people struggle to see how intense of a time that is. So a lot of times people will say, I can't believe you work with middle schoolers, or that's the worst age. And I have a very special place in my heart for those kids, specifically because they are going through probably one of the toughest times of their development, and they're not given a lot of space to talk about these things. When I talk to parents, one of the biggest things I hear is all they care about are their friends. That's all they want to do is spend time with their friends. But friendships and relationships are super important at that age. And from someone who really valued my friends as a young person, I know how important it can be to have supportive and caring people in your life. And I also know that for people who don't have that experience, how tough and isolating that can feel. When I think about best friends, I think about how important of a role they play, especially in young people's lives. Some qualities of a good best friend. And the reason I say a good best friend is because calling someone a best friend doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good best friend. It can just be a title that we give someone. But I want to move from the place of thinking about a good example of a best friend. Some qualities that I wrote down. These are qualities that I've collected through my speeches with young people. I asked them to tell me what are some qualities of a best friend that you appreciate. And here's what they shared. They support you. They're kind to you. They make you feel good about yourself. They are there when you are struggling. You enjoy spending time with them. They encourage you to grow, and they celebrate you. I think these are really great examples of qualities of a good best friend. And I want to tell you a little bit about one of my best friends. So this is Kat. Kat and I met when we were in middle school. Again, going back to a very important time in my life. The first picture on my left is a picture of us at our ring dance. You can tell that I'm just an itty bitty thing wearing a suit that is way too big for myself. And then the picture with the mountain in the back is actually from a few years ago when we were attending a wedding of another close friend. And I like that I get to have both of these pictures because Kat played a crucial role for me when I was young and still to this day continues to play that role. When I was younger, and especially in middle school, I struggled a lot with my mental health. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a different relationship that I had. But I want to acknowledge that for me, having Kat in my corner was so helpful. She was always there to lift me up. When I felt bad about myself, she helped me feel good. She was someone that I could feel safe spending time with. She motivated me. She helped me hold myself accountable. She helped me grow as a person. As we talk about relationships, we also can kind of hold space for relationships that are on the other caliber, meaning relationships that are negative. I had a relationship with a bully, and I knew this person from the time I was in school all the way through college. When I was in middle school, they started saying things to me that really started to make me question myself. Like I said earlier, in middle school, I was already struggling with a lot of depression and anxiety. I lost my father when I was 7 years old and didn't really get the help that I needed to process it. And so I struggled a lot with that. And when this person started speaking to me and saying things to me, I really took it to heart. In the beginning in middle school, it was just a lot of questioning. Why would you say that? Kind of making me feel doubt about myself. But as I got to high school, that relationship seemed to intensify. I felt like every time I turned around, this voice was saying, no one cares about you, no one likes you, no one understands you. What's interesting to me was I had friends. I wouldn't say popular, I was a friendly person. I had lots of friends. I had good grades. I didn't get into trouble in middle school, at least, and not so much in high school either. I was the president of my German club. I was a first or second chair viola player. So I did all of the quote unquote right things that you're supposed to do as a young person. And I believe that if I kept doing those things, that eventually I would feel better. But unfortunately, this relationship I had with my bully really undercutted a lot of what should have been positive years in my life. Once I was in high school, the things that they said to me started to really intensify. They started to turn towards people hating me and me feeling like I was worthless. And that's when I really struggled with my mental health on a new level. It led me to, and I want to give a little bit of a trigger warning that in this conversation, we will be talking about self harm. And that's in high school, one of the ways that I tried to feel better. I didn't have access to mental health resources as a Black man growing up. I didn't feel like I was allowed to be emotional or be sad or talk about my feelings. And so I took them out on myself. And I really listened to what this bully was saying to me. When I got to college, unfortunately, I did not have the protection of CAT. When I was in high school and middle school, anytime I would start to really doubt myself or feel bad or have really big emotions that I didn't know how to handle, I could go to CAT. But when I went to college, she went to a different college in a different state. And unfortunately, I was left with my relationship with my bully. I use this picture because it's actually a picture from a party where I was at in college. And if you zoom out, you can see that there's other people and everyone's having a lot of fun. But I used substances to really numb how I felt because I didn't know how to deal with it. And the things that my bully was saying to me really started to cement and become things that impacted the way that I acted and the way that I showed up, causing harm to myself, causing harm to other people because I was deeply unhappy. Um, I really struggled with how I felt about myself. And that is a huge part of the mental health journey is understanding and taking care of ourselves emotionally and mentally. But because of this relationship with my bully, I struggled to process these things. Now, you may have picked up on this. Sometimes when I'm working with middle schoolers, it's a big shock, but I know I'm working with a little bit of an older crowd. The bully was obviously me. I didn't have an external bully. I had a bully within myself. And that bully was someone who spoke to me every step of the way in a way that really, really harmed my mental health, in a way that really harmed the way I viewed myself. And by the time I got to college, I felt like I didn't matter, that no one cared about me. I was a failure. I should be ashamed of who I was. I felt like there was nothing good about me. And I felt that everyone was normal, but I wasn't. And the reason I share all of this with you is because in college, it was very similar to my middle and high school education. I was doing the right things. I had friends, I had good grades, I was involved in leadership programs. And so on the outside, it really seemed like things were fine. But on the inside, that relationship that I had with myself really undermined and undercut the way that I felt about myself, or excuse me, really impacted the way that I felt about myself and undercut all of the good things that were happening in my life. Because this relationship with myself was built for 7 years, I really struggled to tune it out or to turn it into something different. Now, when I got to college, I struggled a lot with substance abuse and depression, like I mentioned. But at one point, it got so bad that I made a decision that I did not want to live anymore. And one of the things that I look back at that time and I'm always really taken back by is how little the people around me knew this. I was really fighting a battle against myself. I was not getting the help I needed. I did not have access to resources because I created blocks in my own self that did not allow me to reach out and get help. These conversations were not as available and accessible at that time. And so when I was a sophomore in college, I made a decision that I was going to stop living, to stop being. I didn't want to do it anymore. I started to pull away from my friendships. I started to struggle with my education. I quit my job. I got into fights with my family members. I started pushing people away because in my head, all of the negative things that I had been believing and saying to myself for years made me feel like I would be better off gone and that no one could really understand or be there for me the way that I needed. When I made that decision, there was a day about 3 days before I decided or before I planned on taking my life, where I got a call from a friend. We were in a pretty big argument. He was telling me that I was not being a good friend because I wasn't showing up. He didn't know that I was going through a tough time. He just saw that I was kind of withdrawing from people, and we got into a big fight. And in my head, I felt like none of this matters because soon I will be gone and I don't have to worry about my relationships with these people. Now, I hung up on him at one point, and he actually called me back a few minutes later, and he sat me down and said, or he told me to sit down and said that there was something bigger that we needed to talk about. I was unsure of what this was or where it was coming from, but then he told me that one of our a mutual friends had actually taken his life the night before, and he had just found out. I feel like in that moment, there were 6 months of emotions that I had not explored or processed, feelings of sadness, feeling of hopelessness. Everything came back when I got that news because the person that had taken his life was someone that I had a lot of respect for. He was a campus leader. He was loved by his friends. He was very positive and cared a lot about the future. And I was just completely shocked by the fact that he was going through that. And so after that, and being a witness to what happens when people take their lives and how that impacts the people around them, I knew that there was no way that I could do that after experiencing and being part of the pain that is left over from people taking their lives. And so I had to do something and figure out how to live and how to live a life that didn't feel so painful. And that is what I want to offer to you all today. I think a lot about relationships. I think about my relationships with my students, with my friends, with my community, and how important it is to feed these relationships in positive ways. But one thing that I did not realize until I went and got help was that there was a relationship that I had not been putting any work into in a positive way. I went and I spoke with a therapist. She talked to me for 3 hours. I'm very grateful for her because she did not have to do that. And she helped me realize very quickly that I had a very tough relationship with myself. And so I was able to be loving and kind and caring to the people in my life, but I had no idea how to do that with myself. Your relationship with yourself, something I will offer to you all, is one of the most important relationships, if not the most important relationship that you will go through. Because from the beginning of your time here to the end, this is the one relationship that is guaranteed to you. We can love and care about the people in our lives, but no matter where you go or what you do, you are always with yourself. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that the same way that we have to put work into our relationships with ourselves or with other people is the same way that we have to put work into our relationship with ourselves. It also matters because how we feel about ourselves impacts the way that we show up in the world. And so even if it doesn't feel like it, our relationship with ourselves directly impacts our productivity, our motivation, our self-esteem, our connections with other people. So when I was speaking with this therapist, she helped me realize that I needed to take time to really take care of myself and to build a positive relationship with myself. Now, I want to be really clear about this because in that time period, I was really suffering from a deep depression. And I didn't get out of that depression by just building a good relationship with myself. The first thing that I had to do was get help, was get professional help. So after I went and I met with the therapist, I set up something regularly. For a while, I took some medicine to help me get to a solid place. And once I was in a good place, or like a solid place, I guess you can say, that's when I really started to do this work. And so if you're listening to this and you're someone who might be in a really tough depression, this is not saying that you are solely responsible for your mental health. If you are someone that is suffering from a mental health a problem right now around anxiety or depression, one of the best ways that you can be of support to yourself is to get actual help. And at the end of today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing some resources from your community to help you connect to some resources if you need them. But I also want to offer this as a practical way of thinking about your mental health moving forward. To be a good best friend to ourselves, we have to treat ourselves like we would treat someone that we really care about. We must treat ourselves with compassion. Going back to my friend Kat, when I was talking to the therapist, one of the things that she helped me realize was how I viewed myself and how I talked to myself and how I talked about myself. When I told her about Kat as someone who really cared about me, she was able to help me shift my perspective with one simple question. I was being really mean. I was talking really poorly about myself. And she said, "What would Kat say to you?" And in that moment, I had access to all of the positivity and love and support that I felt from my friend. And I was able to say it. She would say, "Be nice to yourself." She would say, "I love you." She would say, "It's okay that you're sad." And I was able to access all that information, but I wasn't able to do it just talking to myself. I had to think about, who is someone that really cares about me and how would they treat me? Even now, working with kids, I feel so blessed. I don't know if you all can see, but behind me, I have pictures of the kids I've worked with over the past 10 years. And sometimes when I'm really struggling and even the cat voice doesn't work in my head, I'll think, what would I say to a student of mine? And it's so easy for me to extend compassion to them, but I realized that I needed to learn how to extend it to myself. When I do this work with young people, it can feel really tough for them. But one of the things that I realize is working with older people, that they have years of maybe unhealthy relationships with themselves. The longer that you've been in an unhealthy relationship, the harder it can feel to get out of it or to shift that relationship. And so, as we talk about these things today and I offer them to you, I want to acknowledge one of the other skills that I focus deeply on, which is growth mindset. When we talk about growth mindset, we often think about education, think about how we show up in school or learning. But I think about growth mindset in a sense of, how do we grow as people? Growth mindset says time, practice, effort. Time and practice and effort. And so if you've been living in a situation where you are unkind to yourself, you're bullying yourself, you don't like yourself, it can feel really difficult to imagine a world where you like or you love yourself. And so, as I offer these tools and practices to you, this is not an instant fix. It took me years of practice and work and support to really build a solid relationship with myself. And so now, as a 34-year-old, even when I have really tough moments or I'm feeling really low, I don't take it out on myself. I have access to a version of myself that loves and cares about me, and it allows me to get the help I need. It allows me to be kind and compassionate and forgiving with myself, which is something that a good best friend would do. Being your own best friend is so important. If you are someone that is mean to yourself, if you're hard on yourself, you say unkind things to yourself, you struggle with your emotions, you feel bad about who you are, you don't think you are good enough, you have work to do around your relationship with yourself. I also want to acknowledge that sometimes our relationships with ourselves started without our permission, meaning people said things to us, we were told things about ourselves, expectations, perceptions of ourselves as young people, and we take them and we make them true. We make them true in our heads. And so if someone says to you, you're not good at anything, you can take that and start to believe that about yourself. But as I offer these perspectives and practices to you today, I'm going to offer you some ways to challenge that with one powerful tool. Saying I'm going to be my own best friend is a wonderful endeavor, but I also recognize that it can feel very difficult. Like I mentioned earlier, we struggle sometimes with thinking about how we can get there in the long run. How are we able to get from where we are right now to having a really healthy relationship with ourselves? This does not mean that life is going to be perfect. It does not mean that everything is going to be great all the time, but it means that if you cultivate and create a good relationship with yourself, that even in the toughest moments, you have someone to lean on. You have inner safety within yourself. So I'm going to offer you all 3 concepts that really stick out to me in terms of starting to build relationships with ourselves. This one can be tough, but self-kindness, this is a huge one. Treating yourself with care and understanding, being nice to yourself. The second one is self-forgiveness, letting go of past feelings, behaviors, and emotions, holding yourself accountable and growing. And I want to go back and I want to think about, because normally I ask people in the audience, but since I don't have access to you, I'm going to offer some examples that kids have told me or that young people have told me. Some examples of ways that you can be kind to yourself is to think about your strengths. You can celebrate your growth. You can celebrate your progress. You can say nice things to yourself. You can even do little acts of kindness for yourself. Thinking about self-forgiveness, I really struggled with this one. When I was in my college years, I caused harm. I think that we often think of people as good or bad, but in my head, and the way that I view people, is that we have the capacity for both. And when I started to do this work with myself, the things that I felt really ashamed of when I was younger, the people I harmed, the harm that I caused to communities, to my friends, even in the workplace, I really, really kind of used it against myself. In fact, the year before I had planned on taking my life was probably one of my worst years. I was really, really, really struggling with substance abuse. I was making and losing friends really easily. I caused harm to people that I loved, who I'd grown up with. And as I started to reflect and grow as a person, I really used that as ammo against myself. And so that year where I was really struggling and causing harm to people or causing harm to myself became one of the foundation reasons of why I believed that I didn't deserve to live. And as I started to build a relationship with myself, I had to hold myself accountable and I had to let go of the past feelings and behaviors and emotions that were causing me to hate myself. With some of the people that I harmed, I was able to grow and learn and apologize and have a reconnection. And some people I was not able to connect with again because of their own choices. What I realized is I couldn't keep holding this against myself. I had to hold myself accountable as much as I could and to learn and to grow. When I look back at that time period, I was so hard on myself, especially because after I decided to turn my life around and I started working with kids, I felt really ashamed because how I was living as a young person was so different from how I wanted to be as an adult, especially for young people. And when I look back at that time period now, when I was in high school, my grandfather passed away from cancer unexpectedly. And then the next year, our godbrother died in his sleep. And then my senior year of high school, one of my best friends passed away in his sleep as well. And so that grief, on top of the unsupported and the unprocessed mental health and the traumas I already had as a young person, on top of the substance abuse, I was able to look back and understand how much I was hurting. at that age, and how much that was showing up in the way that I felt about the world and the way that I showed up for other people. I was really good at hiding how I felt, but when I harmed people or harmed myself, it came from a place of not caring about me and not caring about how I felt or feeling like I was worthless. And so now, as someone who has a good relationship with myself, I can look back at that time period and grow from it, but also offer myself some compassion. I don't look at the younger version of myself with shame and anger anymore because I know I've done the work to make up for what I've done. And I also understand at the same time that I was going through a really tough time without the support that I needed. And so self-forgiveness was a huge one for me in terms of moving forward with my relationship with myself. The last one is self-acceptance, accepting what you can't change and growing the part of you that you can. Sometimes when I work with people or I tell people that I work with kids around helping them feel good about themselves, I get kind of a weird reaction, which is this idea that kids are super egotistical and that's all they do is care about themselves. But what I realize is for young people, a lot of the behavior that we see that is attributed to them being egotistical or them caring what other people think about themselves is all them seeking safety. Even kids who push away and do harmful behaviors to other people are trying to get their needs met. And so I have a lot of compassion for that age because self-acceptance can be very, very difficult. And so one of the other things I think about when it comes to accepting yourself is there are some things about you that you cannot change. There are some things that are about you that are just part of your identity. And it's important to love those parts of yourself or offer compassion and kindness to those parts of yourself. And then figuring out what are the things that you can change. Like I mentioned on the last slide, thinking about the self-forgiveness, there were some, I can't change what I did when I was a young person, when I was a kid, but I can go back and I can hold myself accountable and then grow and make a commitment to do good. And so when I said I don't see myself as a good or a bad person, when I was younger and I was deeply unhappy and depressed and struggling, I caused harm. And as I grew and started to take care of myself and started to accept myself, I actively and intentionally tried to do good as much as I can. Let's take a breather for a second. This has been going nonstop. All right. I like this idea. I have seen a movie. I always talk about this because as I started to work on self-love, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. As I started working on self-love, I realized that I couldn't start with loving myself because I didn't even like myself. There's a very famous movie called Lady Bird, and it's about a teenager and her mom and the really tough relationship she has. And I always think about something that she said when she was having a conversation with her mom. She said to her mom, um, "Do you like me?" And her mom said, "Of course I love you." And she said, "But do you like me?" And so as I started to work on my relationship with myself, I realized that I needed to learn how to like myself and then learn how to love myself. And as we think about these concepts like self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and I forgot the third one, self-kindness, there it is. As we think about these things, I want to offer you one of the most powerful tools that you can use in this situation. See, that's what it says. You may have heard this. This is a huge one right now, and I cannot stress to you the importance of self-talk. Now, I break this into two different areas. The first one being how we talk to ourselves, so our internal dialogue. And then the second one being how we talk about ourselves, so how we talk about ourselves to other people in situations. Both of these are forms of self-talk. With the other one, or with the first one, how we talk to ourselves being the most noted. I also think it's important to think about what we say out loud and what we say to people, because even when we're talking to other people, you're still listening to yourself, right? If I tell someone I'm lazy, I never finish anything, I say that out loud and I'm also listening. I'm also listening. Some examples of negative self-talk, and these are really strong examples because these are ones that kids have given me. And I think that just want to connect us back to the idea that kids are not very different from us. They still have a lot of room to grow, but so do we as adults and even young adults. But these are really common examples of negative self-talk that not only affect young people, but can become solidified over years of repetition for older people as well. Saying I'm not good enough, no one cares about what I have to say, I never get things right, nobody likes me, I'm so dumb, right? Um, as we get older, sometimes these statements can really, really start to intensify. Things like I'm worthless, right? No one would miss me. I don't offer anything. A big one that I struggled with when I was a young adult was the idea of I don't deserve good things to happen to me. That was a very popular track that I played in my head a lot. When I think about my relationship with myself, it was just me using negative self talk. And it's really important because when we say these things to ourselves and we say negative things to ourselves, we start to believe them. We believe them. And so when you change how you talk to and about yourself, it will help shift how you view and feel about yourself, how you view yourself and how you feel about yourself. When I started a practice, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, when I started a practice of changing the way that I talked about myself, I had three major popular ones I went to. And this was recently. This was not even like as a young adult. This was in my late 20s. The first one was I'm so lazy. The second one is I never finish anything. And the third one is I don't know. Those are the two main ones. I said three because I like to give three examples a lot, but those were the two biggest ones that I struggled with. And I didn't necessarily view them as negative self-talk because in my head, I thought I was trying to motivate myself, right? I thought that I was trying to push myself to be better. And sometimes when we think about personal development, sometimes we feel like if we're not doing things a certain way or we're not working with ourselves in the productive way, then something is wrong with us and we are responsible because we're flawed. And what I realized was I believed these things about myself because for years, that's what I was saying. I was saying these things to myself over and over and over again. And so I started to believe them. When I started to believe them, it started to impact me in the way that I showed up, in the way that I finished things. A big one that I struggled with recently, that's the third one. I got it. The third one was I'm not good enough. So I'll tell you a little bit about when I had a chance to hear that voice very clear. I've been doing this work with myself for years. I feel like I've really gotten to a place of love and compassion for myself. Does not mean that I don't have tough times. I'm going through a particularly tough time right now, but the way that I treat myself in this tough time is so different from how I would have treated myself in the past. When I got to do the Today Show, it was a dream come true. I mean, it was amazing. I got to meet Hoda. Hoda and I got to talk about my work. It was everything that I had been working for years. And after it, I got a lot of positive attention. And suddenly, all that work that I had done really started to mess with my head. I started to feel and doubt those things. And the big one is I'm not good enough. I got approached by a learning platform that asked me to make curriculum and to do sessions for adults. I thought, this is easy. I've done curriculum. I have the curriculum done on my computer. I can totally do this. And they asked me to fill out a summary of what my course would be. And as soon as I started writing, that self talk was so loud. I felt like someone was literally in my house with me, standing behind me, saying it to me because it was so loud. And it was saying, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. It led to the feeling of being an imposter. And so I got so mad that I slammed my laptop and broke my screen. And unfortunately, it impacted me in an even deeper way because instead of getting the help and support I needed, because I could not shift that voice in that moment, I actually quit that program, which made it very, very difficult for me to feel like I was good enough. I quit the program because I listened to that self-talk in my head. So I had to do a new practice. I'd gone from learning or from hating myself to learning how to like myself and working on loving myself. And then I made a commitment. I made a commitment to myself. And there's the piece of paper. I have it in my wallet, but as you can tell, it's falling apart. So I'm going to need to laminate it because it's a very important piece of work for me. I love myself was a commitment that I made. And I realized that I had to shift the way that I talked about myself. And once I had gotten to a place of not hating myself, I wanted to figure out how can I get to a place where I do love myself. And this was the practice. When we think about self-talk, it is very difficult. It feels very difficult, excuse me. It can feel very difficult to ignore negative statements. And so when I learned about self-talk, I learned that I had to challenge the voice in my head. I had to challenge the voice in my head. I knew that I loved myself, but that self-talk still kept coming back, and it got very difficult for me to handle it. So what I did was every time I would think of a negative thing against myself, or I would say something mean to myself. You're not good enough. You're going to be alone. No one cares about these things. Instead of beating myself up about thinking them, right? This is a pattern I've lived in for a long time. It's going to be tough to challenge it. I would witness it, pay attention to that thought or the words I said out loud. And then I would take a couple of moments and I would say in my head, I love myself 5 times. I love myself. 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 I started to notice the effect of it within 3 days. It was something that really, really, really pushed me forward. And I started to want to see like how quickly I could change the voice in my head to be the best friend that I needed. So I started to put up signs all over my house. I put them on my mirror, I put them in my car, I put them on my laptop, and anytime I would see one of them, I would take a moment and in my head, I would say, I love myself. I did it in my head because I lived with people. So it's a little bit, it can be kind of tough to explain this to people why I'm suddenly stopping and saying out loud, I love myself 5 times. But I noticed after 2 weeks that there was a huge shift in the way that I felt about myself and specifically the way I talked about myself. I was sitting at lunch with one of my good friends and I said out loud, oh, well, I'm just trash. And I was being self-deprecating. I get it. That's my humor. I like to be that way sometimes. But as soon as I said it, as soon as I said it, I immediately countered it and said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not trash. I don't know why I said that. And in that moment, I knew that through all of the hard work and training that I had been doing, that I started to believe this. I started to feel it and believe it. And it shifted the way that I talked about myself and it shifted with how I showed up. This is a practice I use to this day. I don't take this one out of my wallet as much because like I said, it's falling apart. So I don't know how to preserve it or take better care of it. It's so important to me though. But before anything where I have to put myself in a vulnerable position, I do a practice with myself. I work on my self-talk and I treat myself like a best friend would treat myself. Because sometimes in our darkest and our deepest moments, we don't have those people available. And so it's so important for us to become that for ourselves and to take care of our mental health. When I was starting to feel like I was sinking back into depression because of some other things that had happened in my life, that voice was there to offer compassion and kindness and to let me know that I needed to get help, not in a judgmental way, but as someone who cared about myself, I knew that that was the next step. When you think about taking care of your mental health, we can be proactive. It doesn't have to be just responding to when things get really bad. Sometimes we only think about our well-being when it doesn't feel good. And so I started to actively do this practice as much as I can, and it has dramatically shifted the way that I feel about myself. I don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. I know that I've gone through a lot of trauma in my life. I know that I've had really tough things, and that I also know that I'm deserving of love and compassion the same way that I would give it to people. I started to feel better about who I was. My mental health improved. I trusted myself more. I took better care of myself. I got help when I needed it. I began to grow in amazing ways, and I felt more positive about my life. Now, again, I'm going to keep saying this because this is super important. This does not mean that I do not struggle. This does not mean I don't go through periods of suffering. As someone who's had a lot of trauma growing up, I am more I struggle with depression. It is something that happens to me, but the way that I treated myself as a younger person and how I talked to myself during those times has dramatically shifted. And so now, as someone that loves and takes care of myself, when I hit those low moments, when I'm struggling, I'm not afraid to reach out and to ask for support. I'm not afraid to put my needs first in the sense of I have to be able to show up for myself before I can show up for anyone else. And I feel like I'm taking care of myself for the first time, even when things feel really tough. I love working out. I am a huge component. I don't even know if that's right. Proponent. I love working out. There you go. That's what I'll say. And when I think about training, this was a great metaphor for me. Retraining your brain. We have learned so much about how humans develop, how they work, what works for people, and how the brain grows. We used to believe that at a certain point you stop learning, right? Or this is just how I am and I cannot change it. But the brain has what's called neuroplasticity, which means that you can train your brain at any point in your life. I've worked with people who are in their 50s and their 60s who are also doing this work for themselves because they've learned that it's never too late to shift and change how you feel about yourself or to train your brain in a positive way. When I think about going to the gym, I do reps, right? 3 sets of 10. That's my go to. Well, right now it is. I do 3 sets of 10 times. In the same way that I do reps at the gym, the same way I do reps for my mental health with self talk. I also write things down. If you are someone that doesn't, because this exists, and I just found it out, some people don't hear their thoughts, uh, which which was very interesting to me. I did not know that. Some people do not hear their inner dialogue. And so if you're someone who does that, you can also write or say these things out loud to yourself. One specific trick that we've learned, especially around self talk, is using your name. So instead of just saying, I am proud of myself, I would say, Donovan, I'm proud of you. I would talk to myself and use my name. When you use your name, it creates a deeper impact and a deeper connection between the positive self talk you are trying to take and integrate and yourself. So, using your name when you're talking to yourself, right? You deserve good things, Donovan, can be really helpful. Talking to yourself out loud, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I also know that it can be a little interesting to go out into public and talk to yourself, but talking to yourself and the dialogue you have with yourself about yourself is crucial. So whether you're doing it inside your brain, whether you're doing it in your journal, whether you're doing it out loud because you're not afraid of talking out loud to yourself in front of other people, it is highly important that you get control of what your self-talk is saying to you. Working with kids, another thing that I don't know why I didn't think this is going to be an issue for them, but kids are so hard on themselves. Some of the hardest working people, some of the most caring and loving people that I know are so tough on themselves. And like as I said earlier, with self-acceptance and self-forgiveness and self-kindness, it is great to have high expectations for yourself, but it is so important to catch the way that you talk about yourself while you are doing these things, because it's very easy to become a bully for yourself, feeling like I'm never good enough, or I don't have anything to offer, or you're messing up, or you're failing. It may feel like you're trying to push yourself, right? But in reality, for a lot of people, that actually does the opposite. Here are some examples of positive self-talk, some very, very simple places to start. What I would offer to you is to pick a phrase that resonates. Pick a phrase that you need to hear, right? One that sticks to you and use it over and over and over again until you start to feel it. I can do it. I am enough. I like myself for who I am. I can grow if I put in time, practice, and effort. My feelings are valid. Every time I do this presentation, I see that I did not capitalize that lower I, but in my head right now, I started to jump to, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you still have not fixed that, right? And I just, instead of it, because of what I'm talking about, I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be forgiving of myself and I'm going to accept it, right? I'm not going to use that against myself. So even in this little moment right now, I was able to shift in my head, but because of time and practice and effort. When you start to do these things, it may not feel true to you, right? It may not feel real or authentic, but I would like to offer something to you. When you started being tough on yourself, when you started having negative thoughts about the way that you were or who you were, that didn't feel natural then either. You were probably younger for a lot of people. It starts when we're kids. And so you didn't realize it. But I want to say that because you practiced it for so long, it can feel real and true to yourself. And so when you were younger and those things started, they were also new. They were also challenging to deal with, but you probably did not have the skills or the processes to skills or practices to process these things. So if you say these things to yourself and you start to hear that negative self-talk come up, it's okay. Just keep doing the work. Keep doing the work. And soon enough, the things that you used to say about yourself or to yourself will feel different. They will feel untrue, the same way that these things may feel untrue now. So I'm wrapping up my presentation. I'm so used to doing presentations in front of people. So I've been talking for like 50 minutes, which is great. But this is probably one of the most important slides, is that you do not have to do it alone. Mental health does not have to be a solo journey. The tools that I offered you today are one skill and practice that you can work on for yourself. But like I mentioned, if you are suffering, if you are like really suffering with mental health, one of the kindest things that you can do for yourself is to get the support that you need and to get the help that you need. I also recognize that that's hard. It's hard to ask for help. It's hard to even know what to say sometimes. We tell kids all the time to just ask for help. It's okay. You're allowed to feel this way. And sometimes kids literally do not know the words to say. And so I'm going to offer you a list of resources from your community today with trained professionals who know how to hold space for you, who know that it may feel difficult to talk about these things, right? Who understand what you are going through in a sense of professional support and professional help. And so before I share that resources list with you, I want to go ahead and just offer this. This is the name that I use on all of my social media. I do speaking events. I do coaching for kids online. I stream video games. I make content for parents and teachers. I also work deeply with college students and leadership and well-being studies. Everything I do is underneath this name, Dono Friend. It's not do no friend, it's Dono Friend, like Donovan. So if you type in Dono Friend on any social media, it will pop up because somehow I'm the only person that's using this. So Dono Friend on any of those things, please feel free to reach out and share anything with me if you'd like to. I'd love to stay connected. And then I want to end with just sharing with you all the resource page. So I know it's not super, here we go. So I'll end with leaving this up here. I want to say thank you all again for being here, and I appreciate you for wherever you're at in your journey. Take care of yourself as much as you can. You do not have to do it alone. Oops, I thought it stopped. Sorry, for a second the Zoom button popped away. But thank you all so much. I appreciate it, and I will turn it back to our MC.
Thank you so much, Donovan. That was wonderful. I took
Thank
a lot
you.
of
I can't-
notes. There's a lot there we got to put into practice.
Yeah, practice, right? That's all it is. It's not about perfection. It's just progress. And I meant to say this earlier, with anything that you are trying to get better at, celebrate every time you can. Every time you catch yourself, every time you make a choice where you're being kind to yourself, celebrate it. You don't have to celebrate it on social media for other people to see, but the more that you can celebrate your progress and growth, the more that you will have this motivation and more progress and more growth.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed having you with us here today. And I would like to remind our viewers that our next virtual event is with Dana Altman on October 11th at 2 p.m. So we will enjoy talking to her too. In the meantime, I do encourage you to look Donovan up online and follow some more of what he has to say. Thank you, sir, so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.